Except in really bizarre or intentional scenarios, you cannot get an electric shock at 240 volts potential. But in any given scenario, if someone is receiving an electric shock... Now, just because I'm not a total jerk about these things, I have in fact tested this in a few scenarios. The LED stoplight might become impossible to see in this scenario. Note that for landscape photography and other scenarios where nothing is close to the camera, this can actually create distortion in certain scenarios. The only scenario where you would actually need that much power, in this scenario, the red paint is our hue. Best case scenario, you bought some spares 5 years ago. Even if we assume a best case scenario...
Now, if you're looking for a sort of worst case scenario for the Chicago area anyway...
But worst case scenario, let's take a worst case scenario and assume that each day you use 100% of the range. This was also useful in a scenario like a hotel. So that limit switch is there to detect such a scenario and shut down the furnace if it occurs. It's really frustrating when stuff like this incentivizes us to remain in less sustainable scenarios. It became far and away the easiest option in my specific scenario. So in this particular scenario, there are actually 3 systems, and all throughout this scenario, it could be sending alerts to you. Scenarios like this might occur. Maybe very slightly safer in a few extremely specific scenarios, hurt someone in these extremely specific scenarios I've just described. This one weird trick will do absolutely nothing for any of these scenarios we've gone through. It's likely any of these scenarios will trigger a complete stop of the ride. These thin wires would quickly melt in a dead short scenario. But of course, for the VCR, rentals were a perfect 2 birds, 1 stone scenario. This is actually a sort of second red button in this scenario, but it's not going to totally kill the circuit. All that's needed to prevent this scenario that led to Anton's death might offer wild scenarios of what would happen with the system failure. It can also be used for fill-in-the-blank type scenarios. Your hands will definitely be wet scenarios. It's better safe than sorry. This prevents a scenario where it cools so much that it snaps to the right